My name is Susie Reece.
What inspired you to become a mental health advocate?
Well, I specialize in suicide prevention, and of course, that falls into the mental health realm. And so, what really inspired me was having experienced issues myself. I'd lost some people in my life, and then because of those losses, also had to really learn what my mental health meant and how to navigate it, which isn't always easy to do.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your own journey?
Sure. So, at an early age, I lost my father, and that sort of led me down a path of trying to understand who I was as someone who was actually growing up. And I think around me were a lot of individuals who were experiencing grief, and we didn't really have healthy conversations about what mental health was or even what grief was. And as I became older, I started to realize the impact that it had on me, as well as how I was interacting with others and what I could have potentially been maybe negatively, excuse me, negatively doing with them. So I think for me, it was more or less a journey of self discovery, trying to understand what the mental health was that I was experiencing, and sometimes realizing it wasn't always in a positive state, and then trying to understand how it impacted how I navigate the world, and finding a way to kind of build a bridge between myself and how I was exploring opportunities or life or everything else all around me.
So, how did you get involved in becoming working with people with lived experiences?
Yeah, so I think that when you're in this space, and you probably have this experience of when you're an advocate and being open and talking about it, others come up to you and they say thank you, and they say, I'm so glad that you said that. I've been feeling this way for a while. And so I think it started small like that. It started in community spaces where I realized I wasn't the only one, which sometimes is just validating. You feel like you are the only one for so many reasons. And so it started like that, and then it kind of grew into an opportunity of me realizing that this work, the work of being in mental health and doing suicide prevention, doesn't always include people with lived
Yeah.
experiences. We talk about it a lot, but we don't always think about what it actually means to be on the side of creating efforts or projects, or not just being the receivers. And I think so often this work looks at people with lived experience as, okay, they're going to use this thing that I came up with and it's going to work. And unfortunately, we know, when you've seen something, you're like, I wasn't involved in this. No one that was like me was involved in this, and I'm not going to use this this content or this idea or this project. It just doesn't work for me. And so, the work I do now is including people in the very beginning of efforts and saying, does this seem right to you? Does this feel right to you? Does this work? Is this something that you would have used? Because if we won't use it, it's not going to work, and it's just a
That's
waste of time. So I think that that's really important, and it shouldn't be progressive, it shouldn't be cutting edge, it should just be how things have always been done. But unfortunately, because of the way the fields have been for so long, it is. So I'm lucky to find myself in a space like this.
that's interesting because I live with bipolar disorder too. And when I was first diagnosed 5 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of videos and information about people with lived experience and succeeding, which that goes more a long way than just listening to research or data and all that stuff.
I would agree completely. And, I have major depressive disorder, and I was diagnosed when I was 19. And, it's a lifelong chronic issue that I'll always experience. And I think one of the things that we look for is how are other people who know this feeling, that who know this experience, finding success? How are they finding a way through? Because it's hard to always know the answers, especially when you don't always understand what the issue is. And I think that these communities and these spaces, they create opportunities for connection. But for me, it also created a space of validation, and it made me feel like I wasn't the only one. I'm not broken. There's opportunities for me to find a way to like, build a life around something that I really can't control. And I think that that's what's so rewarding, but I think it's also what's healthy because, I don't get a lot out of researchers or research when they don't understand the feeling of being in a depressive state. A lot of times I'll see stuff and it's like, well, just force yourself to make a phone call or something like that. And it's like, well, I can't even take a shower right now. Like,
Right.
I can't even get out of bed, let alone dial the phone and then think that anxiety of like waiting for someone to answer. So how this isn't a realistic solution for me. It doesn't work for me. I need someone who kind of understands.
How does it feel for you to be connecting with people that have lived experiences?
It's just such a totally different type of working, in a working environment. I think it's personally rewarding. And I tell people that all the time. And I remember some of the early work I was seeing around lived experience, and you can tell it's dated, and it's like, well, the reasons organizations should work with people with lived experiences because it will increase their revenue. And you're just like, oh, come on. Like,
Right.
is that really
Yeah.
what we're talking about? And the reality is that it makes you think. It makes you honestly take perspectives that you may never understand. I will never know what it feels like to have bipolar 2 disorder. And having conversations with you, I could learn about your experience and the challenges that you face and how you've overcome those challenges and how you find ways through. And that would help me understand what it feels like to navigate the world in a way that I can't ever really know. And I think that that makes us more empathetic. I think it makes us look for new solutions in ways that may not even solve things for ourselves, but can solve things for others too. So the work is just beyond measure as far as reward goes. And you create just beautiful connections with people. And, I think about things people have shared with me all the time, stories that they've shared or things that they've experienced or feelings that they've had. And I feel very lucky that I get to carry that with me.
I know there's a lot of stigma around talking about suicide prevention. Uh, do you think people sharing their experiences of being survivors will help erase that stigma?
I think we are still early in the space of mental health and suicide prevention. So I think part of why we experience stigma is, for so long, centuries, people just weren't allowed to have these conversations. And it
Yeah.
can be disheartening in this work to think, okay, people still say this or people still feel this about suicide or mental health and why everyone has mental health. So, but if we look at like the timeline of history and how long we've had these conversations, these positive conversations around mental health really have only begun to take momentum in the past 10, maybe 20 years. So, we don't have a lot of time. And so I do feel like stigma is something that eventually we can come to eradicate. I think the more that people have conversations around the realities of challenges of, having negative experiences, I think the more that people realize that it's okay to have bad things happen, to talk about bad things, and it's not that we're just soaking in it or we're trying to get pity, but we're trying to help understand for ourselves, but we're also trying to let other people know this could happen to you. And look at what I've learned. Maybe you can navigate it better. Maybe you won't have to struggle like I did. So I think, and hopefully in 50 years, the conversations around mental health won't be that there is stigma. We'll just know. We'll just know that mental health is something that everyone has. And hopefully we'll have positive conversations around suicide as well, because, this is something that impacts so many people. It does. And I think there's this kind of myth that it's only a small amount of people that have been impacted, but part of it's because we aren't open about these conversations.
You brought up a good point about having people around. Uh, how important is it to have a strong support system for your treatment?
I think it's very important because there are things that other people can see or recognize that sometimes we can't see ourselves, especially if you're in the midst of a mental health episode, or maybe your medication is off, or you're not reacting the way that you should or that you normally do. I think I've seen that a lot, in particular, where maybe I'm quick to be upset or to get angry, and someone's like, "Are you okay?" Is something going on, and you think, "Oh, this isn't like me," and they recognize it and they can help you kind of see it too. So I think just at the very basic level, when you talk about support and network, it's a little bit of just, kind of offering some support, as far as like, I see you as a person and I accept you, but also I'm willing to kind of recognize and let you know when something may not be the way that it normally is. But then beyond that, I think it's important to have communities where I don't have to explain things. I think if you are in a community and you said, there's spaces where you can go and find others who have bipolar disorder too. And how many times have you had a conversation where they're like, "Yep, I know what that feels like," and you don't have to get into the details.
Right.
And it's so nice because you're like, okay, I don't have to explain. And I don't have to ask questions to get information, because we just know there's just that element of connection. And there's that validation of, I'm not the only one. And then from there, you can take that conversation in so many other directions, where just having to explain, how many times does that slow us down? How many times
Yeah.
does that make us feel like, okay, I feel like I'm kind of being examined, or I'm being treated as something that people don't understand, because I'm having to explain something that is just my everyday. So I think community and networks, and I think it's a vital piece. And humans, we want to know that others are there for us. We want to feel like we belong. And
Yeah.
it's so important that we also recognize, as far as like coming together, that it could be small things, but even if it feels like it's just a small thing, it's often much larger in the scope of our entire lives.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
Oh, so many different things. One thing that I do is, sometimes I just check out of communication with, like, it's, online stuff or text messages. And there's certain people in my life, I'll say, "Hey, I'm going to take a couple days and just kind of be by myself." And so during those times, I'll often spend time with my family and do little things. Maybe we'll go out and do something together, or even do something at home. Like, the holidays are coming up and I want to make some candy. My grandmother, when I was younger, showed me how to make some traditional candies. And so I want to do that and spend a little time just kind of focused on what's in front of me, and not worried about the messages or the DMs or the emails or any of those things. Because I think sometimes, especially when you have mental health issues or concerns, all of that can be overwhelming and you can kind of lose touch. So I'm excited to be able to kind of just check out and focus on the things that make me feel, like a person.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time?
That's so hard. I think that it's challenging to know the right words.
Right.
And I think, especially when you've dealt with loss, I think a lot of people want to have the right words. And so one thing I often say is, there are no right words. And I think we feel like we have to fill that space with, "I'm sorry," or, something that really just can't cover the experience or make it okay or make it go away. And so I think one of the things is that you don't always have to say anything. Sometimes you just need to be there with someone else. And if you're the person experiencing a tough time or experiencing challenges, hopefully you have someone that you can reach out to. But sadly, the reality is that we don't always have someone, or we don't always feel like we have someone. And I think that one thing that we can do is, when we are well, we can make connections so that when we are unwell, we know we have someone that's there, even if it's just an acquaintance or, that connection that knows, like, if I reach out to you and say this, that you'll check on me, and that's all I need. And if you're really unwell, I think it's important to know that it's okay. I think we all go through extremely challenging life situations, and unfortunately, that's part of life.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is to know that sometimes we need professional care and support too. So I always suggest have someone that's like a peer, someone that just cares about you from their heart, and then also have someone in your phone or in your email that's a professional that can take those extra steps if you need those.
You're already doing so much to help others, but where do you want to see your mission in the next few years?
Oh, that's such a challenging question. I think about the future a lot, and I wonder about this work, and it feels as though there's so many opportunities to continue this work. Like I said before, we should have always been included in the beginning, and we weren't. And so I think just ensuring that there's that element of inclusion as far as, I had this thing happen to me and I have unique knowledge and I can give you solutions that others can't give you. I think that's very important. And I think that there are more and more organizations that will hopefully join this movement, and they'll change the way that they serve people like us. And they'll make sure that people like us are involved in every element of work, but also that we're included all throughout organizations. And we're not just peers, or we're not just people that are, getting those services, but we're also making the decisions that can ensure that we're taken care of. And I think there's so many conversations to be had around healthcare and the importance of understanding the people you're serving, and who could understand us better than ourselves. So I think for the future of the work and my mission, I hope to see more organizations build upon the efforts that we're starting. And I hope that more and more people will advocate for themselves, not only to say, hey, we have these concerns and we need support, but to say, we should be involved in the work and we need to create what will serve us because we know what we need.
How can people reach out and learn more?
They can find me on social media. I have my handle is Southern Fried Asian, or they can find me at my website, which is susiereece.org.